I was like, I don't have anything. And he just looks at me for a second. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I don't have anything. And he goes, could you at least pray?
Yeah.
Yes, I can pray. Absolutely. I was able to do that because of his reminder.
Hi there. This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. And usually
we don't have a studio audience, so I figured I'd. Woo!
Generally, oh man, I hope that didn't burst anybody's eardrums. Because if they're not watching on YouTube, they just all of a sudden didn't even see
Just
that
some
you were
guy.
about to commence.
Yeah, I know.
With some sort of physical loud activity.
Sorry about that.
It's too late now.
Okay.
It's over. So, Carter, what exactly are you going over on? And by the way, I really don't feel like we fully explore the title of our show. It's anything but quiet.
That's why I was loud at the beginning.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know why I diminished that light.
Don't ever shush me on the Anything But Quiet Time
You be
podcast.
loud, brother.
Yeah.
At the risk of someone turning us off.
I will get as undignified as this. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going somewhere with this, but do you remember the show, or maybe it's still on, Undercover Boss?
Yes. Oh, I love the Star Wars one.
Well, that's a funny one for SNL, right?
SNL, but
the actual show of real bosses, real companies.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts when you watch that show?
I hope it doesn't happen to any family members I know.
Because you don't know what the employee is going to say.
Hopefully, it's a good boss that does that. I don't imagine a not good boss being willing to humble themselves to that position for
maybe so
a week or so. But everybody has a bad day, and so hopefully they're looking through the bad day to the character of the person.
Sure.
And that they can distinguish between, hey, they're just having a bad day, or no, this person may need a pep talk. You know?
Yeah, no, and the undercover part is necessary so that it's real life, as real as a reality show can be.
I will tell you the hypocrisy of what I just said, though. There have been some places that I've gone into, and I'm like, they could use an undercover boss person in here today.
Right, ASAP.
Because of customer service or whatever.
That's true. We want to see the drama, right? But it is there's a nobleness to it of being able to get on somebody's level. And that is actually corporate speak of 6 levels down is the phrase. You know, if there's a problem, the CEO in the corner office, the 100th floor of the skyscraper, isn't really going to know how to fix it. Mm-hmm. But if he talked to somebody 6 levels down, not the manager, but the manager below that, and then the manager below that, and then maybe just the guy or the girl that's on the assembly line, if he or she was the CEO was able to go down and talk to them and really put eyes on the situation and listen, then they see what the problem actually is and how to fix it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, I can tell you what the problem is, and I could have told you 5 years ago, and then it would be an easy fix. And you see this with Undercover Boss to some degree.
Yeah.
And it is worth noting in our Christian lives too. I love how our pastor put this, that the 6 levels down mentality of people, maybe it is you're thinking homeless people. It could be anybody that is below you in a company. It could be a neighbor or a person of an ideological that you thought, idea that you thought you'd never want to talk to.
It could be a patient and you're a doctor.
Yeah, that's true. I think we have to get out of our easy street chair, if you will, to be able to see what the real world problems are going on. And, we did this thing years ago. Where I was homeless for 2 days, and it was undercover. We really did go actually with undercover officers, but as much as we could, just to see the experience.
Yeah.
And one thing I was just thinking about the other day about,
which I thought you were insane.
Yeah,
I was really concerned.
It was a little insane. Yeah,
I'm like, are you? Like you were still, in my mind, you were still freshly married. And I'm like, what are you doing to your wife?
Well, and she was worried too, and
so
the sleeping on the ground, though we had a tent, and some of that, it was certainly not as hard as other people have it. And then, of course, I saw a couple people, I was like, oh, I think you have it better than me right now. But it was an experience. I think the 2 things that really stick out that I didn't ever think about was the boredom. We think about the needs, which is most important, but you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to do.
Right.
Nowhere to go, nobody to see. And then the other thing that I think is even more relatable to this conversation is nobody would really look you in the eyes. Because we had one afternoon, we would actually sit there and they said, if you want to ask for money, go ahead. Of course, the organization we worked with, they recommend not giving money, but tangible things. But they say, if you want to try it, go ahead. And so I'm just standing there downtown and would say, sir, I mean, not even a smile from most people. And that's a hard situation to be in because you may be faced with it every day, depending on where you work or whatever. But I think what I just came away with was just the dignity to be able to look at somebody, to be able to use their name. Mm-hmm. Some people haven't heard their name spoken in years. Now, this subject is more than just homelessness, but I think it is the idea of being able to, and I just want to read this this passage here because it applies to so much, but I think getting on people's level. This is James 1, verses 22, really through the end of the chapter. But don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. For if you listen to the word and don't obey, it is like glancing at your face in a mirror. You see yourself, walk away, and forget what you look like. But if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. If you claim to be religious, but you don't control your tongue, you are only fooling yourself, and your religion is worthless. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God is God the Father, means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let this world corrupt you. That's all of it, right? There's the tongue in there. There's refusing to let the world corrupt you. This is in the context of people going through trials and temptations. Also, when people say faith without works is dead, faith is how we are genuinely saved through grace from Christ.
Would you read that last verse too, by the way, again?
Yeah.
The one about widows and orphans.
Yeah. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let this world corrupt you. The context of James certainly is your faith genuine? Because faith is what saves you. But if you say that you have faith and then nothing demonstrates that, well, the question is it true? Do you really believe? Do you really have faith? And so all of that, certainly living, whether it's sexual ethics, whatever it might be, we want to, in our faith, in response to the grace God has given us, live that. Not earn it, but live that. Mm-hmm. But I think continuing to get out of my own shoes as much as I can. Mm-hmm. And I think even to some degree, even after the homeless thing, it's like, I'll be at a stoplight and I know I don't have anything. So I do look straight ahead because I'm like, what's going to happen? He's going to come on over here and I'm going to be like, well, I don't have anything. Well, why'd you look at me? I just have this worst fear in my head. But I remind you of the story about the guy that came over and he wouldn't go away. It was one of those. And I had to roll down my window. And I said, man, I'm so sorry. I don't have anything for you. And because I really don't mind talking, I just hate it if I don't have anything to back it up.
Right.
And he goes, I was like, I don't have anything. And he just looks at me for a second. I'm like, I'm sorry, man, I don't have anything. And he goes, could you at least pray?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's my Christian card. Let me give you that.
Yeah.
Yes, I can pray. Absolutely. I was able to do that because of his reminder.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That struck me this week of not that we all are the boss of something in our lives or anything like that. We maybe even feel unseen. And there's that too. But just being able to, I think, notice people, whoever it is, homeless or not, family members, patients, like you said, anybody, actually notice people and see what they're going through.
Our family members.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Our children. Our children come home from school all day. We forget what it was like to be in their shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dealing with maybe bullying comments, dealing with where they stand in the social queue.
Yeah, right.
Teachers, grades that they are freaking out about but don't want to tell you about. Mm-hmm. And you could go on and on about each category of person that might have it. It's not even looking at people even 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon below you. What did you call it? Six
levels down.
The six levels down. Yeah. Okay.
I did think of Kevin Bacon when he said that. Yeah.
It might not even be levels down. It could just be somebody sitting across from you at a coffee bar. Mm-hmm. And maybe they look disjointed and you may be in a spiritual place of wealth.
Sure.
And they need your love and prayer and support. And I remember being at an event where I pulled that particular verse that you quoted there at the end of James 1. And it was for children who were in need. And thinking about how James had kind of put the two right next to each other, kind of like what Jesus did with the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the Shema. This is what all good Jewish boys and girls were taught from the beginning, right?
Yeah, right.
But then he said, and I give you another command, to love one another as you love yourself. And he said, they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
If you're loving them, you're loving me. And if you're loving me, you're loving them because you're already in the right mindset. And so James kind of does the same thing there, where it's like care for widows and orphans. He's not specifically just saying only widows, only. Do you have your orphan card? You know?
Right. Yeah, right.
It's for those in need, is what that was meant to symbolize. And you see that all throughout this 613. Well, in fact, I remember going through and highlighting in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. There's so much call to obedience, but there's also this, make sure you're taking care of foreigners, make sure you're taking care of widows, make sure you're taking care of orphans. I thought that was very interesting because there was a very harsh, they're Gentiles, we're Jewish, we're the chosen ones,
Right.
But God was inviting them to invite people in to be loved in that regard.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He puts it on the same kind of plane there. James is like, if you're doing this, it's almost like you're also like talking about in the next breath, making sure you're not corrupted by things of this world so that you're on track with your faith. That's kind of a big deal. So almost to say, and this is just me putting emphasis on it, if you're not doing this, then you are allowing yourself to be corrupted, right?
Yeah, I think that's not a far off thing to say. If that means if we're not focusing on
what Jesus
serving
tells
God and
us,
serving others, then we would be obsessed with this world in some way, right?
And easily distracted from the person standing next to your window asking, well, can you at least pray? But I think we've all been in that set of circumstances, and we've certainly been the person that's been scammed.
Oh, sure.
And so there's caution there and there's reservation. But if the Holy Spirit is prompting you with that verse in that moment, even if you think that person might do whatever with the gift that you give, like, they're just going to, take whatever they're going to do with this gift that I've given, we have to release those things over to God and obey in the moment, because what does the Bible direct us to do or not do? Yeah. Because we could actually be in saving mode if we don't act, if that makes sense. Like if I'm not going to give this person that I can smell it on his breath, or I can tell by the walk in his gait, I'm staring at someone who's looking to a needle or a bottle for help. And if I do not give that particular money gift, I'm probably helping him.
It could
because I'm not going to help enable.
I think that just honestly for me.
Excuse me as I scratch this really impossible place to get.
You didn't have to point that out.
Well, if you're watching, you're like, what is she doing?
Well, the camera's probably on me now, and you would have gone unnoticed.
Yeah.
But instead, you.
Well, we may have to stop everything down. And you have some nails on you? Give it a good scratch.
Back scratcher. Just to be honest, I think the thing that keeps me from talking to more people in a homeless situation, really even getting involved in people's lives, if somebody has a problem or whatever, I'm not going to be able to fix it.
Okay, yeah.
And I do, because, you stop and it's like, I'd love to give somebody some food if I had something extra, or if the restaurant's right there or whatever. I really don't mind a conversation. The story kind of, in a homeless situation, the story kind of like, I don't know, should I believe it? Should I not? There's always that hesitation.
Right.
But I think more than anything, it's if I stop and you say how you need help, you need a ride to Albuquerque or whatever, or even Celeste Shorter, you need a ride. Well, good luck, man. I'm not generally going to give rides unless I just really feel like, no, I think I can trust it. I think God's leading me to do it, because there's that safety line, obviously. And so anything, it's like, oh, so-and-so, lost their dog, let's say, so-and-so's dog died. I don't want to be the person to just remind them of it either. I don't want to go up there, and so it's like, I don't want to, if I know I can't truly fix, I have hesitation to help.
It's fear.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's because we're afraid.
Sure.
And if God has called us to obedience, then we're not to think about the outcome of the thing. We're just supposed to step out and do the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And even if you can't give him the full ride, what did God tell you to do?
Yeah, maybe it's a bus pass,
And
right?
you're not going to be able to fix people.
No.
And I know that I'm not going to be able to fix people, but you're right. I feel the same way.
Sure.
I can't fix this with a Whataburger sandwich.
Right. But if I'm going to stop, I need to get him an apartment, and I need to pay for it for a year, and I need to get him a wardrobe.
Yes.
Like, that's where you start to that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely.
But, no, I'll tell you a story though on making sure that we don't, because what you said earlier kind of reminds me of that conversation we had last week or the week before. There's the king and there's the kingdom. And there could be two groups of people. We could swing one way or the other. I'm all about, the kingdom, maybe in that vein of social justice, but then I throw sexual ethics out the window. I throw anything of God's holiness out the window, even though I'm helping people. And then there's what a lot of the world considers stereotypical Christians. They go to church, they get fat and gluttony, they help each other, and they that phrase online, there's no hate like Christian love. That is a big phrase online. And so, but the idea there that you love the king, you love Jesus, but maybe there's not as much of a helping hand. And so it's obviously both. And I'm sitting at my oil change place years ago, and it was a time I thought I was busy. I didn't have kids yet. And I thought I was just so swamped right now. And now I'm like, what did you do all day? So I asked my former self. And I remember needing a moment. I'm like, oh, two birds with one stone. I'll be waiting in my car and I can finally sit down and do a quiet time. I hadn't done a quiet time in a while. I'm like, this is great. I can sit here and read my Bible. I know it'll be 45 minutes. And I start to read, and this guy in the waiting room is a chatty Cathy. And it's random stuff, but he keeps literally bringing me into the conversation, And I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'll talk to him for a second, and then try to look back down. And this guy won't shut up. And then in the middle of it, I just think, this is stupid. I'm reading about something that says how to love people.
Yeah.
And I should just love people and talk to this guy.
So good.
And for the rest of the few minutes that I had, we actually conversed, and I found out a little more about him. And I don't even know if I ever saw him again, but I'm like, yes, that's what the thing, you prepare for it. But when you're in the moment, just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. So
I want to express something that hopefully it will translate well. Visual aids in a classroom are so helpful in understanding whatever the teacher is trying to teach. Having something demonstrated for me has always been like, if it's in a movie, like I'm going to retain it better because it's just presented differently. But at the end of the day, the test given, the answers I'm to know, I'm accountable to know. We are God's visual aids, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
I think in part, there is a guilt trip that can come along with witnessing towards people.
Yeah.
You need to do this. You could be and I've said these words, you could be the only Jesus that someone sees today.
Sure.
Absolutely is true. And you could be that visual aid that makes them think, maybe I was wrong about Christianity because that person doesn't act the way that the other person did that hurt me. You could be that person. But I've also heard it shared by people who study to know the reasoning behind we believe what we believe, the apologetics, this is the reason why. And Jesus is either true or he's not. And what people choose to believe is really, it's on them.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
We're to present what we can present. We are the visual aid. We even give data. Here's the Bible. This is what it says. At the end of the day, they are accountable to God.
Yeah.
And if I did not act in obedience to what God is asking me to do in the moment, he is never short of supply. There are other people, and I'll miss out on the blessing of obedience.
I think there's accountability there, certainly, but yeah.
I'll miss out, and it's like, I still have to grow in this area. Start all over again, right? So I want to make sure that I'm stepping out in obedience and not missing that blessing with the Lord and connecting with him and us just having that moment together. Do you see, honey? It's not scary like you make it up in your mind. I'm not about fear. It's about love. and sharing authentically me, you don't have to be afraid of doing that.
Yeah.
Because you're just simply presenting something that's true and loving.
Sure.
And I have to remind myself of that. But at the same time, I know that I grew up in a church. It was awesome, lovely people. But yeah, there would be a guilt trip kind of hand along. Did you know, the skits that were performed on stage where that the two people in a car, they both die, and one of them knew Jesus and one of them didn't, and they're both kind of in the waiting room before they go to heaven or hell.
Yes.
And look, some of those messages can bring people to Christ, so I'm not going to look down my nose at it. At the same time, as a child, I'm watching that going, oh my word, it all hinges on me. And I don't think that's not true.
Yeah.
It hinges on the decision that you've made. You either choose Christ or you don't. Yeah. And God tells us in his word that if you seek me, you will find me. People who are truly seeking, they can use any excuse that they want to not believe that Jesus is true.
Yeah.
We're not, I heard it said the other day, if you believe that Jesus is the only way, then you're pretty obnoxious. You're pretty prideful. You got an ego. Okay. And I heard the guy say, take it up with Jesus. I didn't say it. I didn't say it.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what he said.
And
right?
you've spoken to this point too, because I think it's both ways. It is people can find any excuse to not believe. And then also especially in those pressure-packed settings of a revival or a church camp or whatever, people can find every reason to maybe save face, or like you've told about with your dad being a children's pastor, anybody want to accept Jesus and they just come up for the sticker.
Right.
Or because they were fearful of that skit. Now, I think those can be great sparks, but at the end of the day, just because somebody went forward to a stage doesn't mean they necessarily
have a relationship.
And just because somebody rejected Jesus doesn't mean they're a lost cause for the rest of their lives either.
That's right.
And so I think kind of bringing in that tangible sense of how I'm afraid to help if I can't fix. It's the same thing spiritually, right? If I think it's going to be unsuccessful, then I'm hesitant to have the conversation. And yet what I should do is just present, and God will do the rest. And it's their decision to make. We can't save anybody.
Yeah, it's true. And so I was listening to a message from Max Lucado, and I guess he's okay.
He's all right.
I love the way he writes.
Yeah.
It's just, speaking of visual aids, everything he writes is just, you're there listening. And he starts his message with a cow. And Carder and I are in Texas, wherever you live, there are cows everywhere here. And they chew their cud, which this is disgusting. And my dad told me when I was a little girl, because it was a way that he kind of demonstrated what meditating on God's word could be. Regurgitating your food and chewing on it.
It's a great image, Dad. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad. But it is fascinating. The cow, a healthy cow, chews its cud. A healthy cow chews its cud. If it's not chewing it, something up with the cow.
Oh, okay.
And so you can chew the cud. Apparently, they chew up to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
What it is, if you don't know what it is, and I'm so sorry for this grossness, but they eat their food and then they regurgitate it in their mouth, and they yum, 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 because it softens their food to do that, and they chew on that. Can you imagine anything in your mouth? Chewing on gum more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, this double bubble, more than 10 seconds.
Oh, dear Lord.
I mean, yeah.
The flavor's gone, and you can't, it's like a piece of cement in your mouth.
Right, yeah.
But a healthy cow does that. And then Lucado then translated that over to the thoughts that we have. And you were talking about the fear that keeps us from doing a thing, and that could be rooted even further back. Like if there's a flow chart as to why we're afraid, it probably all started way down here, like with something somebody said, oh, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. What I say might be ridiculous and not taken the right way. Or you never do anything right. I want to help that person, and for some reason I'm not going to get this right. And then we go up the flow chart a little bit, and then we go up the flow chart. I'm like, there's all these levels as to why we arrive at this place of, why am I hesitant to do the thing that God's asked me to do? Why am I hesitant to look in the mirror and see myself as a child of God when all down here, Rachelle, you're a nerd. You look ridiculous. Your hair's terrible. You never amount to anything. You're fat. You're this, you're that, whatever. And you allow these things to collect over time that will then contribute to the way that you now are processing or are even saying things about yourself. We chew our thoughts this way.
For a lot more than 8 hours.
And the things that we are supposed to be chewing on is not cud. It's not the ugly crap. It's the stuff that Jesus tells us that we are.
Yeah.
It's the stuff, you are a child of the Most High God. I was reading through scripture today. Actually, you know what I was doing last night? Because I'll go through these times, especially the older you get, you start seeing all the things that the world tells you is ancient, aging, sagging, isn't good about you anymore. And I started trying to evaluate and compartmentalize the legs that maybe you don't find perfect have walked you through valleys. The arms that you find indelicate have held your children and hugged your husband for the first time. You know, you start calling those things what they are. Maybe the wrinkles around your eyes are the laugh lines from that moment that you could not stop laughing with your family about Aunt so-and-so. You know, those are and that's how we need to start viewing ourselves and see ourselves for the masterpiece, the beautiful person that you are through Christ, that you are not that person who can't do anything. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Philippians 4:13. We start speaking that, and that's the stuff now I'm ruminating on.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I'm chewing on and thinking about. And the Bible tells us exactly who we are. And he also tells us that we have a mind of Christ now because we are a new creation.
Yeah.
That our thoughts, just because we think them doesn't mean we have to think them.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's really valuable because if we are meditating on things that are of God and not the things that are going to only just contribute to the pile of stuff that's just a lie.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it is like, I think it can be as simple as if I'm a believer in Jesus and I have been saved, I've been regenerated, I have the Holy Spirit living in me, then I think that it may be as simple as if I know I have a choice between good and evil, and even if I choose evil, this is a reminder to choose good, but even if I choose evil, the fact that I have a choice that I at least have the lens to see, I think is such a good sign, I guess, to me, because I think if you're an unbelieving person, you don't even see a choice there.
Yeah.
You're just going to do what you want to do, and there's no stopping and thinking. And I mean, I know there's social niceties and social norms and there's laws and whatnot, but as for just the everyday life, like if I stop and think even about, did I come off harsh earlier? And it's not just to save face, but it's like, I really hope they weren't upset by what I said.
Maybe there's an apology needed.
I think there's these things that cross our minds, and that's just, and again, a reminder to choose the good. It's not that we can, oh, well, at least I have the choice and I'll choose evil every time. No, we should choose the good and not sin. But just the fact that he's opened our eyes, and if we have the mind of Christ, that's what you reminded me of, the mind of Christ to be able to see these things. Yeah,
and we do. According to his word, we do. And so the renewing of our mind, that might be a daily thing, like we grab hold of Lamentations, is it 3:22 is what I want to say, but I don't know, I could be wrong, where it says his mercies are made new every morning. And there's this thing that we can do that if, just like anything planted in our brains that's stuck in there like a weed, because any seed sown that is growing a weed that's a lie. And that's not bringing up anything to help the garden.
Sure.
We got to uproot it. We need to clean house and figure it out.
Yeah.
Why do I think that way?
Yeah.
Why do I say that to myself? Is there any factual evidence here that says that this is a big catastrophic deal? This thing that I've placed on myself, this burden that I carry. Because Jesus tells me that his burden is easy and light.
Yeah.
And if I'm carrying stuff here that ain't making me feel good,
Right.
then I'm not carrying the right burden.
Well, and we should do the work. I think that's a good, for counseling, and things like that. But man, it reminds me, and this is just more for hope, because we should do the work now, right? But I think we're never going to get fully there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the hope that it kind of reminds me of, Jesus tells a parable about the weeds in the field with the wheat. and they're allowed to stay there because it will uproot. Now, this is what this is actually about, is the great harvest at the end of time.
Right.
Believers are the wheat, and the weeds, the false prophets and the people that aren't believers, they will be cast into hell.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's explaining here, there's evil in this world, and it's not going to change until the final judgment happens. But I think that's an interesting segue to what you just said.
Yes.
That at the end of time, the weeds in my own head will be removed.
They will be gone.
And I will be a child of God in his presence and perfected.
In the meantime, I remember as a child, my dad, alongside being a pastor and working in the church, he would mow lawns, and I would help with weeding. And you got to get it by the root, right? You got to get right down there by the base and try to get it. And if you didn't get the taproot of that root,
it's going to come back.
It's going to come back. So try to get at the thing, because you know how weeds are. They just spread everywhere. If you've ever made the mistake of mowing the lawn over the weeds instead of pulling the weeds first, you now have it everywhere. It's such a mess to clean, but it can be done. It can be done. It's just nobody wants to do that. So let's just get at it now. And then I was reminded through Lucado of another parable, and it didn't necessarily, like, out of context, this is not what this meant, but it worked out perfectly because I knew what he meant. So Jesus talks about, it's like a demon-possessed man, and this was in Matthew. In fact, let me make sure I'm getting it the right. Matthew 12. There is this guy who's got a demon in him, and then all of a sudden the demon is removed, and now, this clear space. And Lucado reminds us there are certain religions, especially Buddhism, I'm thinking about just clearing your mind. The problem is that if I'm never putting God's word into my mind and planting that there,
right? Yeah.
The demon then comes back. He's like, you know what? Let's go back. And he brings along 7 of his friends or whatever it is with him.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you're at, how many more thoughts have I just allowed to enter my clear mind?
Yeah.
So I have done that. I have an actual illness that I have to not only clear my mind, but no longer think upon the thing because of my obsessive compulsive disorder. If I keep trying to make this thing go away, it won't. There's nothing to satisfy it. It will always be a problem. There may be issues like that in your own life. You don't even need medicine for it like I do, the chemical imbalance that I have. It just may be a thing that always feels like it's there. Maybe you just need to switch gears, like switching train tracks, like just don't think upon it. Because the more we think upon it, the more it grows.
Yeah.
The bigger, and it always comes back bigger.
Sure.
Even if you squash it away with enough, oh, no, it's fine, always comes back bigger. And so I don't want the enemy bringing back how many more stupid lies and planting those weeds again.
Right. Well, and to be honest, what it reminds me of clear-headedness is we stuff our feelings at times, and then we, instead of being alone with our thoughts, because I don't always like, depending on what's going on, I don't always like that. We just mute it with a show or even a podcast like this, right? This is even hopefully this is actually filling up with good things because we're talking about scripture.
The dog did something on the floor, you put a rug over it.
Yeah, kind of like that. And that's just, we in the long run should deal with the root, right? And be able to refill with things that are true. So this is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. If this is your first time, you got through it. Thank you.
And we weren't as loud as maybe you anticipated, except at the beginning.
And right now, I'm sorry.
I brought that upon.
This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast, and we'll hopefully see you next week.